to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
My name is Lorraine Bonner. I'm a sculptor, and I have done a lot of thinking about empathy, and I think it's a really great topic. I think it's going to be the foundation of the social reconstruction and rehabilitation and liberation that's going to happen if we're going to survive as a species. And I think it's pretty exciting that the Art of Living Black is going to be working on that. I think it'll be really fun to work with other artists on that. I'm Lorraine Bonner, and I work primarily in ceramic sculpture, although I've also done some stone work. I'm real interested in the topic of empathy, because the piece that I have in the gallery is the result of some of my own studies in issues of empathy and barriers to empathy and some other things like that that I can bring up in the conversation. I have been studying empathy for quite a long time. I think that empathy is fundamental to our human nature. It's actually built into our nervous systems, that we be empathic with one another, that we are able to feel in our own bodies and minds and what the other person is feeling. And it's the foundation of our social structure. And for, I think, millions of years, that's how human beings operated. That was all there was, and that was what we knew of each other. And then at some point things changed, and some other people, some other way of interacting with human beings started developing, which was much more domination-oriented. I think of the human being as basically a person who wants to be harmonious, who wants to have a harmonious life experience with other human beings. And I think that's one of the reasons why music is so important to human beings, and why when people are struggling against domination, so often they turn to song, which we saw strongly in the civil rights movement, for example. But I think, and I can see that happening now. We've all been quite devastated over the last several hundred and even thousands of years. I think my analysis is that it began with agriculture, but that's a whole other discussion. But certainly we're seeing the disintegration of society because of this loss of empathy and the emphasis on domination. And yet, as the artist said before, we do have this great resilience as human beings, and we can see empathic endeavors taking place all around us in terms of both like sustainable agriculture and farmers markets and communal gardens, the ways in which people have been forming community watch systems, the way that people are studying nonviolent communication, trying to establish peace departments of a department of peace instead of a department of war, you know, at the federal level. And there's this, what I get from that is there's strong belief on the part of people who are intrinsically harmonizing human beings that really this is what we need to do, that if we just all got together and behaved harmoniously with one another, that that's all it would take. And that somehow then it would rise, it would increase, and the world would be transformed. And in my reading of history, this has happened many times before. And in fact, it's one of the things that the civil rights movement was about. And yet I see in my reading of history that, in fact, even as the civil rights movement was happening, there were people who were closing down the school systems of entire counties so that they didn't have to integrate them. They were draining the town pools so that they didn't have to integrate them. We can see even right now today, when we're debating this healthcare issue, and we know that thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in America are getting sick, being impaired, being disabled, and dying because of lack of health insurance. And the health insurance companies are paying millions of dollars to the lawmakers who are taking those millions of dollars and saying, oh, well, you know, single-payer health is off the table. We're not going to do the one thing that would really transform healthcare in this country, because we just want to have a lot of money and be on top of everything. And I don't think that we can sing those people into a more empathic stance. I really don't think so. The piece that I have here is called Privilege. And it's an example of how I envision the people who are actually destroying the planet, destroying human society, by covering their ears, not listening to anybody, covering their eyes, not seeing. I don't see how a health insurance executive cannot see the suffering that is being caused by their actions. They have their hands over their eyes, they have their fingers in their ears, and what's coming out of their mouth is a combination of barbed wire, which to me has just a million different connotations, both of incarceration, of exclusion, of making a fence around my property and nobody else can come in, of putting people into jails, and even of the kind of electric shocks that are used on the bodies of people who protest. And although I believe in empathy, and I think that it is what we all need to have in order to create a new world, and it's what we have had forever. It's in us. We can't not have it. We have to realize that we need some new tools to deal with these people who are not going to respond to empathy. You know, some of them will, I mean, you know, there's a gradation. There are people at far end who are really the ones at the top, and then there's people who are just confused. There are people who are injured and don't know how else to act. We see, you know, these children that are shooting each other out in the streets. They're not the ones that are causing the problem. They're the ones that are suffering because of the problem. So we need to find some new ways to deal with the people who have their hands over their eyes and their fingers in their ears and are spewing out barbed words. And that's all I have to say.
Wow.